Alrighty, perfect. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Em. I'm one of the librarians here at Rockland Public Library. We are so thrilled to be hosting tonight's Armchair Tour of Paris. The first thing I want to note is for people on Zoom, who I think is actually that camera right now, if you'd like to keep your cameras and microphones muted throughout the talk, just to make sure that the people on Zoom can watch the talk in its entirety. And then if you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to type them into the chat and I can read them aloud to Jayne for you. I think that might be it. Oh, the next couple events coming up at the library. Next week on June 1st at 6:00 p.m., we're going to be hosting Amy Truesdell to talk about her great-great-grandfather, Roland Truesdell, who was actually a Union soldier in the Civil War and wrote over 100 letters to his family back home during the Civil War. I think he fought in the one of the New York volunteer divisions. I don't have it down here, but one of them. And she's going to be talking about kind of what it was like to go through his letters over 100 years ago and sort of process what her family had been through back in the day. The week after that, on June 8th, we're going to be hosting Elizabeth, who is going to be talking about her life as well. She's a memoirist, and her father sent her when she was a teenager, her and her brother, off to a sailing class to learn how to sail and kind of shape up because they were kind of troublemakers. And it's going to be her story of their adventures at sea and learning how to sail. So that should be a really fun one as well. All right. Now for tonight's program, I'm happy to introduce Jayne Boisvert, who obtained a Master of Arts degree in French from Boston College and a Ph.D. from the Department of Languages, Literature, and Cultures at the State University at Albany, New York. An ardent traveler, she has visited many different areas of France and the Francophone world over the years, and I'm happy to introduce it to Jayne. Go right ahead.
Thanks, Em. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So glad to see so many of you here and on Zoom. I would like to say to the Zoom people right away, I hope you will never feel left out. If you are feeling left out, if you can't hear me or see me or whatever, please send a message to Em and she'll let me know, okay? Well, I'd like to thank Em for inviting me to come tonight, and also the Rockland Public Library. I've been here before. I don't think any of you were here in 2019 when I gave a presentation on my first book. But anyway, tonight we're going to talk about book number 2. And I usually like to start by telling you about how these books came to be. The first one, you can see it all says cheapo snob. That's because our son Daniel calls us cheapo snobs. And he exaggerates by saying that we want the best out of life for a quarter. And, you know, that is a wild exaggeration. I guarantee you we never go that low. But anyway, after I retired from teaching at Russell Sage College in Troy, New York, our son Daniel said, "Mom, you should write a guidebook to Paris because you love the city, and you should call it Cheapo Snobs because of the way you are." And I mentioned this to one of my professors from SUNY Albany, and she said, "Well, if you're going to do that, you might as well research where famous Americans lived," because she was in Paris on the right bank. There's an English language bookstore called W.H. Smith, I believe that's the name of it, and the person in the bookstore said to her, "People are always coming in here saying, where did famous Americans live in Paris?" So anyway, I combined the two ideas, the cheapo snob look at, shopping and, getting into museums more cheaply and all of that stuff, as well as where did Ernest Hemingway live, and Josephine Baker and Alexander Calder, all these famous American people. So that's book 1. So after I finished that, I said to my publishers, what can I do for an encore? And they actually suggested the topics for books 2 and 3. All 3 books deal with Paris and what to see in Paris, and what to eat and where to eat, and often where to stay, things like that. So book 2 is a lot of those famous sites, and the history of the sites, just like in book 1, but different sites. None of the books repeat. But it concentrates on famous French people like Monet and I always have to stop and think who else is in there. Who are some famous French people that you know? Camus is in there, right? Okay. Marcel Proust is in there. Yep. Thank you, guys. Oh, phew. Okay, I get up here and then I'm like, blah. Okay, so then the third book is the international side of Paris. So it's international people, but it's also museums that have an international bent, like the Quai Branly. I don't know if any of you, how many people have ever been to Paris here? Oh, good. Are you fans? Yeah, oh, good, good. Some people say, meh, but anyway, Quai Branly is a museum that deals with treasures from the different cultures around the world, from the Americas to Asia and everything in between. So anyway, those are the three books. Tonight we're here to talk about book 2, like I said, Paris and Parisians. Where can you stay in Paris? Okay, this is a question people often ask me, and a very good thing to do is to rent an apartment. If any of you are or were professors, like my husband and me, you can go to sabbaticalhomes.com and get a really good deal on an apartment in Paris. And we did that while I was researching book 1 in 2013. So 10 years ago at this time, we were in Paris, staying at a sabbaticalhomes.com. So here's some advice if you're going to rent an apartment. First thing, what are the square meters? A typical American hotel room is 25 to 30 meters, to give you an idea. So you probably don't want anything smaller than that. And the first time we ever thought of this, we were sitting on a bench in Paris, and there was a lady sitting next to us, and she was from New Zealand, and she said that she couldn't stand to be in her apartment because it was so small. So that's why I bring that up to you. So first thing, it should be at least 30 meters, at least, hopefully bigger than that. Whoops, oh, what did I do? Oh, Em, I might need some help. I hit the wrong button.
Right, you just need to click back up.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thanks. All right, and which floor is it on? Many of you might know this already, but unlike the US that goes first floor, second floor, third floor, in Europe in general, the bottom floor is called the ground floor, the rez-de-chaussée in French. And then you have the first floor, which we call the second floor. So if you're looking for an apartment in Paris like we are, because we were looking for a place for the end of August, actually we finally found one, but several times the owner of the apartment would say it's on the troisième étage. Well, guess what? That's the fourth floor. And if you're arriving from the airport with your luggage and you have to carry those bags up to the fourth floor, it might be very uncomfortable for you. I found that over and over again this year looking for. In fact, I would even write to people because they would write it in English and say it's on the third floor, and I'd write, is it on the third floor or the troisième étage? So there's a difference. Be careful of that. If it has an elevator, that will help you, like if it is on the troisième étage, it's on the fourth floor, but it has an elevator, even though the elevator is probably going to be quite small, and those of you who have been to Paris before probably know what I'm talking about. I mean, really, one person and a suitcase is sometimes all you can fit in these elevators. Do you have experience with that? No, but it is funny, that's true. So anyway, if they do have an elevator, that helps. Which arrondissement is it in? Okay, this is also a big thing. Paris is divided into districts that they call in French arrondissement. And it's in the shape of a snail because it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, up to 20. There are 20 arrondissements in Paris. You probably don't want to be in the 20th or the 19th because it's so far from the sites that you want to see, from Notre Dame, which unfortunately is still closed until next year, and Sainte-Chapelle, the Louvre, all those famous places are far from the 20th. And you can take the subway. So if you don't mind that, if you don't mind taking the subway in, well, then you can stay out there. We If you stay in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's probably going to be way more expensive than if you stay just a little bit farther out. We prefer the 14th arrondissement. That's usually where we rent an apartment. That's where our apartment was in 2013. Hotels also. We like that neighborhood. It's like more like a friendly neighborhood, like not so touristy is what I'm trying to say. So, so find out the arrondissement and that will help you, you know, to be closer into these sites. For cheapos, does anybody know what couch surfing is? Yes, tell me.
It's when you go from friend to friend and sleep on the couch.
Very good, that's right. Okay, if you're lucky, they might have a spare room that you can sleep in. I first learned about this from a teaching assistant who was at my college, and she did this all the time. It is a very good deal. I mean, you do have to become a member of the organization, the Couch Surfers organization, which is just a modest amount. I think it's under $40 a year. But then that allows you to get in contact with all these people that allow you to come and stay in their home and for free. Though they do suggest that maybe you want to bring a little gift for them or cook them a meal, something like that. But for cheapos, this is hard to beat, right? $40 for the year and you can stay wherever. That's pretty good. They also have hostels, and hostels have improved a lot since our backpacking days. Some of them nowadays even have private rooms. On the other hand, some of them require you to bring your own sheets and towels, so you would really need to look into that. I don't know, looking around, if any of you would be interested in such a thing. I know we are past this. This was in our youth, but maybe you would want to pass this on to someone young that you know that might like to save a few dollars. I mean, you could really save a lot, right? You know, like, I don't know, hostels, maybe $25 to $50 a night versus, what, $250, $350 a night. So these are for cheapos. There are inexpensive hotels in Paris. These two, one on the left is called Ibis in French, it's Ibis, and the other one is called Timotel. Both of these hotel chains have hotels at varying stars, you know. They have 2-star hotels, 3-star hotels, 4-star hotels. But you see, they're basic, they're Spartan. We have often stayed at the Ibis at the airport. Especially if we have an early morning flight, we stay at the airport in a cheap hotel, and then the next morning get on our flight without having to worry about getting to Charles de Gaulle Airport, you know, in time for the flight. They are very, very basic, you know, very, very tiny bathrooms with thin towels, but the beds are comfortable, you know. I mean, it's all right, but. As far as staying in a hotel like this in Paris for a week, I don't know. I think that's also behind us. These are two hotels that we have actually stayed in. Somebody was mentioning the Hotel Regina in Paris, near the Pyramide, near the Louvre, near the statue of Jeanne d'Arc, which sounds like a very nice hotel. The one on the left is a 2-star hotel that we have stayed in many, many times. It's called the Hôtel Vendôme Saint-Germain. It is not on the Place Vendôme. That would be very expensive. It is in the 5th, both of these are in the 5th arrondissement, so close in, near the Sorbonne, the university. A 2-star hotel, the reason they're given the stars is because they have certain amenities, like air conditioning or more square meters. But a 2-star does not have air conditioning. So we might not want to stay there in August when it's extremely hot in Paris. But we have stayed there. Our son got married in France, and that was in June, and it was fine. We stayed there. The one on the right, my husband got a really good deal by going to the hotel's website. So this is a little something I pass along to you, that if you go to a hotel website, and normally up at the top that you can click Francais or English, you know, and then you can often get a very good deal. This was by far the nicest hotel, the Henri IV, the nicest hotel we've ever stayed in Paris. It was big. It somehow had cross ventilation. It had a big bathroom. It was very, very nice and comfortable and close in, you know, like the 14th is on the other side of the Jardin de Luxembourg, so it's kind of a walk, right? But this is in the 5th. It's on the Rue Saint-Jacques, so if you know where that is in Paris, it's in a good location. For snobs. Snobs are going to have a field day in Paris because there are all kinds of extremely extravagant hotel rooms. Condé Nast, which is some kind of big conglomerate but also produces a magazine, has a Reader's Choice Award every year. And these hotels, as you can imagine, these are not your backpackers staying in hostels. Therefore, they are staying in hotels that are around $400 a night, which to us, you know, that's just too much. But if you find yourself on the cheapo snob spectrum, liking your snob to be in the hotel area, well then you might want to check these out. For us, our snob area is more in the food section, but we'll talk about that later. The gold list is unbelievable. You should really just Google this and check out Paris gold list hotels. I mean, just thousands of dollars a night, right? I mean, unbelievable. Anyway, that's the gold list, and it comes out every year on Condé Nast. Beyonce, I'm sure you all know Beyonce, stays in very luxurious accommodations, like at Le Meurice. Le Meurice is a hotel which also has a restaurant, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And it's a 2-story suite called a Belle Étoile suite. 2 stories, and take a look at the bedroom and look at this bathroom. I mean, are you kidding me? Like Ibis, you could probably fit 4 Ibis bathrooms at least into that one. So I always like to ask people, what do you think Beyonce paid for one night at the Meurice in the Belle Étoile? Belle Étoile means beautiful star, if you don't know. What do you think she paid? Just take a guess.
5,000.
How many?
5,000 a night.
5,000 a night? What did you say? 2,500. Those are all extremely extravagant prices that I would never pay. You know, I mean, for me, it's hard to pay 200 a night, but were you going to say 20,000 a night? Our son, there's a YouTube video of me doing this thing, and he said he guessed 10,000 a night, but 20,000. It's in the first arrondissement. I don't know exactly. Oh, yeah, that's right. It's on the Rue de Rivoli. Yes, was that you who said that? Yes, very good. That's right. 20,000 a night. You know, famous rock stars can afford this, but we're going to talk about another one too. It's staggering, right? It's hard to imagine. So if you're a famous rock star, and you know, I'm not saying that you aren't, this might be a place for you. Now we're going to talk about food. We love to eat well, and you know, cheapo. We also like to save money. Has anyone ever been to this Place du Falafel? It's in the Marais. The Marais is the 4th arrondissement. It's the old Jewish quarter, and it's very charming. I love that area of Paris. That is a great sandwich at the Place du Falafel. You can get a falafel sandwich. There are other sandwiches that you can get there, but you can see all the people, like the long lines, right? When we went, the last time we were in Paris, I guess was 2015, it was €5 for a delicious sandwich. If you don't know what falafel is, it's fried chickpeas that are ground up. And I know that you might think that sounds terrible, but you should try it. Really, it's a fantastic sandwich. It's like in a pita bread with lettuce and a wonderful sauce. I think the price now is up to like €10, but 10 euros for lunch, that's a pretty good deal. So what we did, we stood in line, we bought our sandwiches, we went to a park and sat down and ate it, and we're just loving every bite. So that's a very good deal. Another thing I want to mention before I forget is you can always go into a boulangerie, into a bakery in France in general, and get a good sandwich or a quiche, or you can go into a supermarket and you can find probably a less good tasting sandwich, but you can get, if you want to really have a cheap lunch, and some of us, we just are on the go and we need to get something fast, you can go into a bakery or into a supermarket to buy something. This food truck is run by a California couple, and it has certain stops during the week. One of them I know is at the François Mitterrand Library, the new Bibliothèque Nationale of Paris. Excuse me. So that's one of the stops. It's called Le Camion qui fume, which means the smoking truck, and I don't know why they call it that, but apparently the hamburgers are really delicious. We have never tried it, but it's very popular with French people, and they have a lot of different styles of hamburgers, and I don't know what else they sell, but again, it's popular, and apparently it tastes really good. And if you want to save money at lunch, it's a good thing to do. One other thing I just thought of too, sometimes when you're walking around, especially in the 5th arrondissement near the Sorbonne, they're like gyro places and places that have like a little window opening up onto the street, and you can see the sandwiches and pick out one, and that's also a very good way to save money at lunchtime. We took a group of students once to Paris, and what they would do, the students, is buy the sandwich and save it for dinner and have it in their room, just to save money. So it depends on your budget, and it depends on, how snobby you are, or cheap. Okay, this I really wanted to mention to you is a traiteur, and it doesn't mean traitor, it sort of sounds that way. Actually, it's one of those French words that's very difficult to translate. If you look it up in the dictionary, it says caterer, but it's not really a caterer in the sense that we imagine. It's a place that has prepared foods inside. Sometimes they have a table or two with a couple of chairs, but very often it's plat à emporter, so it's takeout. This is another way to save money for lunch or for dinner. You can go in there and, many of them are Asian. You can see that Asiatique, okay? It's delicious, and very inexpensive. So again, a good way to save money in Paris. Simple et bon, it's really simple, but they left off the LE just because of to make it cute. It means simple and good. Okay, we're back to Le Maurice, and this is very good for Beyonce. She just is upstairs in the hotel. All she has to do is go downstairs and look at the beautiful dining room. So it is on the Rue de Rivoli, you're absolutely right. And I wrote down how much it is for a meal. Oh yeah, by the way, Jacques Pépin, what's the word? Not interned there, but what is it when you're like, what do you say? Apprentice, thank you very much. That's right, I think his book is called The Apprentice, which I read, but forgot about that. Okay, so meals are about $350 a piece, and I'm sure that's, I know people are shocked. I'm shocked too. And that's of course without wine or without any kind of drinks, that's just your meal. So you can live the life of luxury, To go back to the hotels, all of these hotels are rated, like I said, 1 star, you don't want to stay there. Well, you probably don't. 2 star, we stay there. 3 star. And then there's a class called Palace, because they contribute to the culture of the city. And this is one of those places. You can imagine $20,000 a night and $350 for a meal. We like something in between. Our anniversary is at the end of August, and we hope to be there in Paris this August for our anniversary. And one time we went to l'assiette, which means the dish or the plate. And I'm not sure how we found out about it. It is in the 14th, as you can see, which was very near where we were staying. And I think we went on this website. In French, it's called La Fourchette, and in English, it's called The Fork. If you Google thefork.com, and then you can find out, you know, it'll have an English version, and you can find out, like in your arrondissement, wherever district you are in, what are the restaurants nearby, and you can pick a place that serves the kind of food that you like, you know. This was delicious. You know, it was probably about 100 euros, which that's a lot, right? But it was our anniversary, and we didn't feel like a falafel sandwich, you know, for our anniversary. So we both, I don't think we had an appetizer, but my husband had tête de veau, which is translated as calf's head, and I had selle d'agneau, which is a lamb dish, and they were both delicious, and we had dessert and wine. And again, it was probably about 100 euros. So, and when was that? Last year, my cousin wrote to me and said that her son was going to be in Paris, and where should he go to have a meal? So I said, oh, well, we really liked this place. And he went and he loved it. So I pass it along to you, that there are little jewels like this. You don't have to pay $350 a night, or on the other hand, 10 euros, you know, for a meal. You can get something in between and have a very nice anniversary dinner or whatever. Now we're going to talk about sites. I want to go back and say, book 1 talks about the big sites. You know, the Eiffel Tower, it tells you the history and the best days to go and things like that. So the Eiffel Tower is in book 1, Notre Dame, Sainte-Chapelle, Versailles, and Giverny, all those places, and I'm leaving out a bunch. The Cluny Museum is in there, and the Louvre, of course. They're all in book 1. So book 2, these are still wonderful sites. They're just not the same as the ones that are in book 1. So, you know, like if you bought book 2 and you're like, well, the Eiffel Tower isn't even mentioned in here. Well, no, it's in the other book. This place, I'm going to ask you where you think this is. Before I get started, I will tell you that do you know what it is? That's right, that's right. It's also called Le Palais Garnier. How it came to be is Napoleon III, who was the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte, was emperor. And he almost was assassinated at the previous opera house. So he put out a call for plans for a new opera house that, you know, maybe he wouldn't get killed at. And 170 plans came in, and the one that was chosen was by Charles Garnier, who was 35 years old at the time. And his idea was to create a space where no part of it was undecorated. And I think he did a very fine job, because it's well decorated, but I don't think it's disgustingly decorated. You know, it's not like Baroque or something. I think it is very, very beautiful. That's the grand staircase. We, a couple of years ago, well, quite a few years ago, took a self-tour, and I think you can still do that. You can go during the day, and they, you know, I think it's just a few euros, and you can take a tour and see all the beautiful decorations, excuse me, without seeing, mostly nowadays they have ballets there, but without seeing any kind of performance. On the right, you see the auditorium. Okay, again, it used to be strictly an opera house. Now, more of the operas take place at the Opéra Bastille, at the Bastille Opera House, and mostly ballets take place here. The ceiling is interesting. It's a Marc Chagall ceiling that was created in 1964. I thought that was very forward-thinking of, you know, probably a conservative jury to replace the decorations around the chandelier on the ceiling by asking a modern artist like Chagall. And when they first debuted it, you know, people clapped and people loved it. And then, of course, there was a lot of controversy because people don't like change. But I think they did something very remarkable. They put some kind of retractable device so that they could take it down, I think. And the old ceiling is still up there. So, you know, that's good. It makes everybody happy, you know. I think it's beautiful. I love it. This is a pastry. And at the time that the pâtissier created it, he didn't know what to call it. And he showed it to his wife. It has all these layers you can see. Oh my gosh, if you ever get the chance, oh my Lord, so delicious. It's like hazelnut, cream, and nuts, and crunchy and chocolatey. So anyway, he showed it to his wife, and she said, well, it reminds me of the balconies, the loge at the Paris Opera House. And so he called it Opéra. So if you find a really good pastry shop in Paris and ask for an Opéra, we had a place near us when we were there in 2013 that was just outstanding. Yeah, okay. Yeah, yum. This building reflects the turmoil of the 19th century. In the 19th century in France, there were religious people would get in power, and then non-religious people would get in power. So this building went from being a church to a mausoleum, back to the church, back to the mausoleum. So now it is a mausoleum that looks like a church. And inside, in the vault, there are all kinds of famous people are buried, like Victor Hugo, Émile Zola, Rousseau and Voltaire. Marie Curie is buried in there, and Josephine Baker, most recently. Just, I believe it was last year, though it could be 2 years ago, they transferred her remains into this is called the Pantheon. And it's a very big honor. It was a very big honor, and she's, you know, an American woman, but she was highly respected by the French because during World War II, she helped the resistance. I'm sure the Nazis just thought she was like a daffy performer, you know, who probably didn't have a brain in her head, and they were so wrong because she would get these secrets out of the Nazis and go to the bathroom and write them down and put it in her underwear so that they couldn't find anything on her. And yeah, so to have her buried there, an American buried at the Pantheon, is a very big honor. This building is not in Paris. It's about 45 minutes drive outside of Paris. And what I always say is, if you don't want to fight the crowds at Versailles, and believe me, you will fight the crowds at Versailles, and yeah, it's too much. I'm never going back there. We took my sisters in 2013, and that was too much. This is, like I said, outside of Paris. It is a beautiful chateau. It was the home to monarchs of France for 800 years, beginning with François Ier in the 16th century and going through Napoleon Bonaparte and, you know, etc. The name of it is Fontainebleau. Apparently, each one of the monarchs kept adding on to it, and there's something like 1,600 rooms in the chateau, all of which are not open to the public. And I say, phew, thank goodness, because who wants to walk through all those rooms? But you can see how absolutely fantastic it is. The ceilings, the floors, the decorations, it's really worth seeing. And the outside, I love the architecture and that staircase going up. So again, if you don't want to fight Versailles and you don't want to drive all the way to the Loire region to see those castles of the Loire, this is a good alternative and just 45 minutes outside of Paris. Now we go into the people part of this book, and these are all French people, like I said. The book is called Paris and Parisians. This young woman was born in Paris. She studied ballet as a child. And at age 15, her picture was on the cover of Elle magazine. And that caught the eye of a number of famous people, including a director named Roger Vadim. So she was 15 when people noticed her. At age 18, she married Roger Vadim. He, you might remember, was at one time married to Jane Fonda, among others. Yeah, I can't even. Do you know any other wives of him? I couldn't begin to guess. But anyway, so it was a short-lived marriage. He did, though, while they were married, cast her in her first film, and here she is, called And God Created Woman. It was in the 50s. I'm not sure the exact date. I have it written down, maybe 1958, something like that. She was a very beautiful woman. So beautiful that she's still alive, by the way, that the people who designed Marianne, I don't know if you know what Marianne is. Marianne is a symbol of France, like Uncle Sam is a symbol of the United States. So you have a statue of Marianne like in all the, the mairie, the town halls and things like that. You have statues of Marianne around. Well, my point is that this woman, whose name is, do you know? Very good. You guys are good. Brigitte Bardot was the first woman, real woman, that they used as a model for Marianne. Since then, it's a thing, like Catherine Deneuve was at one time a model for Marianne also. So that's Brigitte Bardot. She's very controversial now. She's said a lot of things about immigrants and, but she's a very big animal rights activist as well. This man you might not have ever heard of, but I think he's worth knowing about. You know who he is? Okay, that's all right. I'm sorry? Oh, the Lumiere brothers. Oh, no, but that's a good guess. That's very close. This man was interested in magic in his youth, and then he got interested in cameras. I think he went to London and bought a camera. And you can see that he would hand draw and paint these individual pictures, and then he put them together into short films. He was the first person to create a narration by film. And like this one, A Trip to the Moon, was 1902, and then this Le Voyage Impossible was 1904, so it's The Impossible Voyage and A Trip to the Moon. He made over 500 small films with all these special effects and everything long before George Lucas and Spielberg, and his name is Georges Méliès. When we were in France in 2020, we were in the south of France and we were waiting for a bus, and it was Avenue Georges Méliès, and I was like, oh, that's so great. The French remember him, but we Americans, we, don't even know who he is. But I think he's worth knowing, that he was such a pioneer in filmmaking. Here's another director that I really like. Anybody know him? Okay. His name is Jean Renoir. That's right. It's probably up there somewhere. Jean Renoir. And if the Renoir part sounds familiar, well, that is right. He is the son of Pierre-Auguste Renoir, the painter. And what they said about Jean is that he painted with a camera, and that is very true. I don't know if anyone has ever seen any of his movies, like La Grande Illusion, World War I movie, and the other one, that means Grand Illusion, well, it's pretty obvious. La Règle du Jeu, which is Rules of the Game. These are wonderful films. They are artistic, they tell a good story, they're just very, very well done. If you get the chance, you can probably get some kind of streaming service and see these movies. La Règle du Jeu is about the aristocracy in France, and actually Jean Renoir appears in it as an actor as well. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful filmmaker. Oh, one thing about him, in World War II, he went to Hollywood, and he worked for 20th Century Fox. And they were so backward and so unappreciative of his artistic vision that he referred to them as 16th Century Fox. So it was not a good experience for Renoir in Hollywood. Now we're going to talk about an architect. This man is responsible for all those beautiful entrances to the metro. I'm sure you've seen them. It's an Art Nouveau style. He did the subway entrances, but that was not all. He also designed a lot of homes in the 16th arrondissement, mainly. And this one is called Castel Béranger. And again, you can see the lovely work that he did. And I especially like the furniture that I believe is in the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, the Decorative Arts Museum in Paris, with beautiful curved lines of the desk and the chair. The chair's kind of cut off, but anyway, his name is Hector Guimard. A wonderful architect. This woman was a sculptress. She was studying sculpture in Paris, and the teacher had to leave, had to go somewhere. And so the teacher got a substitute to come in to teach this woman and other people, and that was Rodin, Auguste Rodin. And he became the lover of this woman, even though he was involved with a woman forever, for ages. And he wouldn't leave his wife. She wasn't his wife, she was his common law wife. But he wouldn't leave his wife for Camille Claudel. Camille Claudel was the sister of the poet Paul Claudel, and she did beautiful work. Maybe some of you have seen movies that are dedicated to her years ago. This one, gosh, I think it might be 1988 or something like that, with Isabelle Adjani. There's a new one too, well, a couple of years old, with Juliette Binoche, also about Camille Claudel. I mean, she had so much talent that Rodin even stole some of her works, like take her name off and put his name on, you know, and then she also helped him with a lot of his great sculptures. This one, the waltz in the third picture, was on Debussy's desk for his whole life. You know, she gave it to him. He might have been a possible lover of hers as well. And yeah, very, very beautiful. She went through a lot of mental crises, and at one point destroyed a lot of her works and ended up in a mental institution where she eventually died. So it was a very sad story, but a very great artist. Speaking of great artists, here's a painter that I really love. There's a museum in Paris called the Marmottan, and it's now called the Marmottan Monet Museum. It's in the 16th. It's a little bit far out, not too far, but she is also featured in there, and her name is Berthe Morisot. She came to Paris from Bourges in central France, and she met Degas, and Degas appreciated her work, and so did Manet, and she actually married Manet's brother. Okay, Eugène Manet became her husband, and she did these wonderful paintings. I mean, I love every one of these. She's really well known for her transparencies. Like you can see the curtains in this one, and then the bodice and the fan, you know, it's just all so delicately done, so beautifully done. And then this, it's called the Cradle. I have the year written down. I'm going to take a wild guess and say 1924. But you can see the baby through the transparencies. You know, it's just wonderful. I think maybe a lot of people don't know her name, but she was a really wonderful artist. By the way, I tell where all of these people lived in Paris in the book. I give a short biography of each one. I tell where they lived, maybe where the bars that they went to or cafes and different things like that. So that's how I incorporate Paris into these people's lives. This man is an author. You might recognize him. Victor Hugo, that's right. He wrote Les Misérables, okay, which was a novel before it became a play and a musical and all of that. And then the picture in the center is Notre Dame de Paris, which we refer to as the Hunchback of Notre Dame. So he was the author of that. He was not just a novelist, he was a poet, foremost as a poet, and a politician. And he lived on the Place des Vosges, beautiful, beautiful place, It's a square in Paris, really worth seeing. And there's a free museum, cheapos, take note, a free museum that you can visit, the permanent collection of his home. It's like recreated, you know, it's not exactly how it was when he lived there, but it's very well done. It's got a lot of artifacts, like there's a desk. He liked to stand up when he wrote, so he had a standing desk, and like his dining room set is in there, and also a Chinese room that he created for his lover, you know. So anyway, his name again is Victor Hugo. Yeah, a wonderful writer. Another wonderful writer, I taught a course for Midcoast Senior College last fall, and we read one of his stories. When he was young, his father went bankrupt, and so he had to go to work. He had to quit school, and as a teenager, he went to work as a tutor in a school, and he was absolutely tortured by the children at that school. So he really disliked that work, as you can imagine, and he wrote this novel called Le Petit Chose, which is something like Little Whatchamacallit, which is probably what the students called him because he was short stature. So his name is Alphonse Daudet, and he instead of becoming a tutor, continuing to teach, he became a writer. And this Lettres de mon Moulin, if you read French, these are the most charming stories in the French language. And so last fall we did read one of his stories. He was a wonderful writer. And at his death, Émile Zola spoke at his funeral and spoke of the profound charm of Daudet's writing. And that's what you get when you read it, is how charming, how sweet. His politics, quite a different story, but we won't get into that right now. Another writer, a woman, had a very happy childhood outside of Paris, and she married at age 20. Unfortunately, she married a womanizer named Willy. And Willy considered himself an author, though he had ghost writers, you know, so he had people helping him produce these books. At one point, he says to his wife, whose name, by the way, was Colette, Sidonie Gabrielle Colette. She just goes by Colette, but that was actually her last name. Willy, at one point, her husband, said to her, "Why don't you write down your memories of childhood?" And so she did, and he published it under his name, as you can see in the second picture. And it was a huge success, Claudine à l'école, so Claudine at school, and then there were other Claudines, and they were all huge successes. He would like lock her in her room and make her write. You know, he totally exploited her. After they got divorced, you know, he held all the rights to all those Claudine books and everything. He was quite the guy. But she did ditch him at a certain point, thank goodness. And she went on to write other things, including Chérie, which I read years ago. It is the story of an older woman who has an affair with a very young, possibly teenaged boy. And she wrote Gigi, which I'm sure we've all seen the movie with Maurice Chevalier and Leslie Caron. And have you seen it? Yeah. And Louis Jourdan. For Little Girls. That's the one. Yeah, very good. Yeah, that's the movie. So she wrote that story, Colette. Now we're going to talk about a museum. I have a proofreader who read 2 of my books before they got published in Georgetown. And when we talked about this guy, she said, Erik Satie is a weirdo. And that's right on target. He wrote many beautiful pieces. This Gymnopédie, I wish I could sing, because you know this tune. Blood, Sweat, and Tears took it and redid it kind of their way, but they called it Variations on a Theme by Erik Satie. So if you look that up, maybe ask your smart speaker, they would play it for you. The reason he's a weirdo is because, well, he did a lot of strange things. For one, he walked around with a notebook, jotting down musical ideas. Okay, that's not too weird. During World War I, Paris was being bombed, and he was found lying at the foot of the obelisk writing music while bombs are falling all around. So that was pretty weird. And then when he died, they went into his apartment, and there was stuff, like he was like a hoarder, stuff all over the place, including musical pieces like just lying on the ground, and two pianos, one placed on top of another. You know, so eccentric maybe is a nicer word to describe him. But again, you know, a wonderful, creative musician. Another one is a singer. I know you know this guy. He was a protege of Edith Piaf, and Piaf helped him choose songs that suited his voice better, and she had him have a nose job. He was born into an Armenian family in Paris, and they, as Armenians, understood oppression and prejudice and everything. So during World War II, he and his family helped hide Jewish people and gays and anybody else being persecuted by the Nazis. And because of this, later in life, he just died a few years ago at like age 94 or something. He received the Raoul Wallenberg Award for his contributions during World War II. And his name is Charles Aznavour. Also, if you ask your smart speaker, I just did this last night, just say, you know, Alexa, play Charles Aznavour, and you'll have just wonderful music, you know, in French, and yeah. So, does anybody know him? Have you heard of him? Yeah, 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 very good. La Bohème is one of his big songs, and apparently now his granddaughter is singing, and she also has a beautiful voice. Now we're on to fashion design. This woman grew up in an orphanage where she learned how to sew, and that was good, because then she opened a shop. I think first she was selling hats, and then it developed into clothing. And here you see her in the second picture fitting one of her famous suits onto Romy Schneider. Romy Schneider was an Austrian actress who lived in Paris. She's actually in book 3 of my series. And her name is Coco Chanel. So we still know her name. Her real first name was Gabrielle, but she started out as trying to be a singer, and one of the songs she sang had Coco in the title or something, and so they started calling her Coco, and that name stuck. And obviously we still know the name today. What has recently been discovered about her, though, is that during World War II, she was a Nazi agent. She was in love with this handsome Nazi officer, and she even volunteered to go to Spain and pass secrets or whatever for the Nazis. So, yeah, interesting past. She had a home, an apartment on the Rue Cambon, but she also had a suite at the Ritz, and this is good for snobs. You can rent this place, okay? Look how beautiful it is. And remember, the Ritz bar is just downstairs, so you might really want to do this. What happened was her original suite was on the 3rd floor, but now to make money, they moved it down to the 2nd floor, all of the furnishings and everything, and some of her memorabilia, and so you could have a better view of the Place Vendôme down below. Yeah. So again, you're going to spend $20,000 a night to stay in the Chanel suite, but it will go up to $30,000 during the holidays. So just FYI. So, can you believe these prices? I mean, it's unbelievable. Now we're talking about politics. Oh, I got to hurry. I got a lot of time, not much time left. This man gave an important speech to the French from England. I have the exact date written down, but it's like something like June 1940. And he was saying to the French people to try to rally them, because after the Germans had invaded in World War II, he tried to rally them by saying, we've lost a battle, we haven't lost the war. And then he led the French resistance. His name is Charles de Gaulle. In the second picture, you can see him in August 1944, on the day of the liberation of Paris. There he is, head and shoulders above all the rest. The French nickname for him is 2 mètres, 2 meters, because he's about 2 meters tall, which is like 6'7", 6'8". I mean, you can see he was so huge, you know. He had started out in World War I. He was under Pétain, and he really idealized? Yeah, that's the right word, right? Pétain. But then, of course, in World War II, Pétain was a puppet of the Germans, of the Nazis, and so then he wasn't really on de Gaulle's best list anymore. But he was a hero for the French and became president of France for about 10 years. I put this picture in on the right because we always think of him as this big, tough guy going around saying inappropriate things about Vive le Québec libre and all of this. But he had a daughter with Down syndrome whom he really loved. And I like that picture, you know, the big, tough guy, but he did have a heart and loved his daughter, as he should. Another military man, his name is Alfred Dreyfus. I just found out the other day that Julia Louis Dreyfus is a distant relative of his. Yeah, he was a student in the military college in Paris, but some of the officers didn't like it that a Jew was in the officer training school, so he witnessed anti-Semitism there. And then after he became a soldier, in his office, somewhere in his department, someone was passing secrets to the Germans. And solely based on his handwriting, they said that he was the traitor, and he wasn't. And even after the military found out that he wasn't the one, they found out who the real one was, they covered it up. And this caused Émile Zola to write a famous letter to a French newspaper called J'accuse, I accuse, and he accused the military of this cover-up. Meanwhile, poor Dreyfus went through several trials, was stuck on this island off the coast of South America, Devil's Island, where he was broken body and soul. The center picture symbolizes when you are like decommissioned, they cut the buttons off of your vest and break your sword in half. And there are several statues of Dreyfus around Paris. This man is in the other category because he's kind of a singular man. He was an aviator. Not too many aviators in the book, though there is one other one. He had that handlebar mustache. He tried several ways of making flying machines, including gliders and kite machines, because he had made a fortune designing headlights for cars. So he had all this money, so he invested like $150,000 into building these planes, and he even witnessed one of the Wright brothers in Paris. And about the same time, a London newspaper put out a call for someone to fly across the English Channel, and they were going to give a 1,000-pound prize to whoever did it, and he did it. His name is Louis Blériot. You can see the plane today. There's a museum in Paris, I tell you in the book. It's the Arts et Métiers Museum in Paris, where you can see the plane. But he went on to sell then, many copies of his planes to different countries around the world. So he was really a big success and a true aviation hero. He had over 50 crashes while trying to design these planes. I mean, these guys really were heroes. The last major guy I'm going to talk about is Louis Pasteur. Whoops, I guess I'm double pumped on that one. He was a chemist in Lille, northern France. And a distiller came up to him and said, why does some of my product go bad? So Pasteur had the idea to put a drop of the spoiled liquid under a microscope, and he saw the yeast working in there, but he saw something else, and that was germs. He discovered germs. So he is the father of microbiology. Because he was a chemist and not a doctor, a lot of the doctors looked down on him and didn't believe his different theories or whatever. So he developed a very hard exterior. But he went on to do many wonderful things for humanity, including developing vaccines against rabies and yellow fever and all kinds of things like that. So, exactly, we see that word every day, like on orange juice and milk, you know, pasteurization. It comes from Louis Pasteur. So again, a huge hero. Maybe not the nicest man, but again, he had to have this hard exterior with the people that he was working with. So this is just a portion. There are many others in the book. They're all French people, like Edith Piaf. We talked about her in relation to Charles Aznavour. There's Rodin, who was the lover of Camille Claudel. In the middle, I think you recognize this guy. He was so young. Do you know? Very good. That's Jacques Pépin when he was a young man. And yeah, I mentioned him before that he apprenticed, thank you for the word, at the Le Meurice in Paris. And then this is Jacques Cousteau, who had the undersea world of Jacques Cousteau, which maybe we remember from our childhood. And this is the famous Louis Pétain, who became a puppet of the Nazis during World War II. So that is my presentation. And there they are, Piaf, Rodin, Pépin, Cousteau, and Pétain. Those are my books. We have them up here if you're interested in them. And now I'm going to open it up for questions. I hope you have some for me. Anything about the places to visit, the chateau or the Palais Garnier, or?
Tell us what was so difficult about Versailles.
Okay. You can get tickets in advance, and I strongly suggest doing that. We did not. We went with my two sisters. We stood in line outside in this long line that wrapped all around that makes Disney World look like a dream. And an hour and a half to get in, and then you get in and, the Hall of Mirrors where the Treaty of Paris was signed, so packed with people, like you try to take a picture to show people what it looked like, and it's just people everywhere, and all of the rooms were like that. So we came out, and I said to my sisters, boy, that wasn't worth it. And they're like, what, are you kidding? That was fantastic. Well, yeah, if you're seeing it for the first time, it is fantastic, Versailles. But that's a good question. Yeah. A lot of places, there's a bookstore in Paris called Fnac, F-N-A-C. And you can go there and buy advance tickets, and sometimes they give you a time, like to see the Eiffel Tower. You have to be there at, say, 11:30 or whatever. And the Louvre, Versailles, you can buy tickets at places like that. So I strongly suggest you do that for those very popular places. Another thing I point out in book 1 is that the Louvre is free on the first Sunday of the month. Don't do that. Don't do that. We're cheapos, but come on. I mean, everybody goes, right? It is so packed that you can't even imagine. So
Already everybody's there, even on a pain day, so I can't imagine it on a free day.
that's right. On a free day, it's ridiculous. And there are a lot of places like that in Paris that are free on that, first Sunday of the month. But yeah, thank you for the question. It's usually the first Sunday of the month. You're not going to be around?
That's what we're going.
You are going to be there?
So don't go that day.
Yeah. There are other museums. In fact, the Musée d'Orsay, which I talk about in book 1, is the Impressionist Museum. It's much smaller. You can get those passes at Fnac and other places. I think some of the train stations, like the Gare Montparnasse, the Montparnasse train station, you can get these tickets and you can go to the head of the line. So the Musée d'Orsay, O-R-S-A-Y, is where they have all the Impressionist art. Art Buchwald, you know who he is, right? He's a journalist. He hated the Louvre. He lived in Paris for 14 years. He never spoke, his French never improved. But the point I was trying to make is he had a 6-minute tour of the Louvre. And I think he had the right idea. But of course, it's easy for me to say, right? I've been many times and I see, yeah, my sisters loved it, of course. But he said 6 minutes. You go to the Mona Lisa, you go to the Venus de Milo, and you go to Winged Victory, and then you're out the door. Top 3 beautiful things to see. Of course, I keep telling people too, when you go, especially the first Sunday of the month, the Mona Lisa, first of all, is small. And then when there are, 100 heads in front of you, it's just, yeah. But it's, yes, because it was stolen at one point. Yeah, it was stolen. So I think there is. It's, yeah. And of course, people now, they have all these selfie sticks and everything. Oh my God, it's just craziness. Anybody else with a question? Yes. There's something called the RER, which is a speed train, a speed metro. It's like a souped up metro that you can take in from the airport. My children would say it's kind of sketchy. You have to watch your backpack, watch your purse. There are a lot of poor people who are pickpockets, The regular metro, again, you don't walk around with your wallet in your hand and your purse unzipped and so. It is safe. We've never had the slightest problem. There are also people, con men that do things like one time they actually said to my husband, "Oh, is this ring yours?" And we knew about this con, and he goes, "Yes," and he takes it. And then, of course, they want it back because it's part of their con game, But so, it's a big city. You have to be careful, but we've never had any problem. And the subways are basically clean and fast. And I was telling you before, if you have never been to Paris, what you do, you have to determine which direction on the subway you're going. And how you determine the direction is the end point. It might say, I don't know, I can't think of any end points of it, but you have to look on the subway map and, okay, we want to go this way, so we're going to that direction. And then you follow, you're underground and you follow the right way to go. But we also like taking buses. Buses are great because you're outside, right? You're up and you can see things. And it's also kind of tricky to read the different pathways, because sometimes there are one-way streets and you might catch it over here, but you might have to get the way back, a couple of streets over. So anyway, it's a little bit more complicated, but you use the same ticket. And just quickly, I want to say that the new ticket, I think it's called Travigo. It's like a card, like you get in Washington, D.C. or New York, and you use on the subway or on the bus, and Paris has a good transportation system. I wouldn't suggest driving. Yeah, thanks for the question. Anybody else? How about on Zoom?
I was just going to say, I have one on Zoom.
Okay.
Kate asked, do you have a favorite Parisian market to recommend?
There are a lot of good markets. They're just in the neighborhoods, One that we like is, let's see, Edouard Quinet came to me. Edouard Quinet, it's in the 14th, and that's why we know it, because that's where we stay. Edouard Quinet, there's another one, Maubert Mutualité. There are food markets just everywhere in all these little neighborhoods. You just have to kind of know, and you can ask at your hotel, or you can just ask random people, when is the marché, what are the marché days, and people will tell you. There are also flea markets, really interesting flea markets. I have even bought things at flea markets, I like doilies and things like that, and you can find little, beautiful old lacy looking things at these flea markets for just, a couple of euros. So that's fun. And there are several of those around. I talk about them in the books too, the flea markets. Good, thank you. Any more questions from the Zoom people? No? How about here? Anybody else? Anything? Yes.
Is there village outside the city that you could get to the public transportation that's like a hidden jewel? Or
Okay, in book one, I talk about Giverny, which is Monet's home. And I tell you how to get there. You have to go like to the Gare Saint-Lazare and have a ticket to Vernon, Vernon. And then when you get to Vernon, then you have to take a bus. But of course, you know, all tourists, that's what the tourists are doing, is they go to Giverny, which is Monet's town. And wonderful. It's in Normandy. We were there with my sisters again, and the tulips, I've never seen such a variety of tulips. It was around this time of year. It was in May, probably around the 15th or so, and all the tulips were out. It was just stunning. So that's very, very lovely, and it is a small town. Yeah, good question. Sure.
Place I'd love to visit is a place called Auvers-sur-Oise.
Uh-huh.
Auvers-sur-Oise.
Hmm.
It's where Van Gogh is very beautifully done, but it's this suicide, but it's this very, very picturesque town with easy access, but I can't remember which station it is.
Okay. So for the Zoom people, they might not have heard Auvers-sur-Oise, which I think also a lot of painters painted, you know. Yeah, yeah. So, but you like to go there? It's just a small town? Oh, wonderful. Oh, great. Yeah, we can all look it up, you know, and I learned something because I love Van Gogh, so yeah. Yep, great, great. Thank you for that. Anybody else have something to contribute or another question? Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Oh.
Thank you. This is terrific.